Shabbat with his needle. If it's close to Shabbat, he can't go out with his needle. They're afraid, the Mishnah is afraid that he might come to carry his needle on Shabbat itself. So if you're within a half hour before Shabbat, excuse me, half hour before Shabbat, he already cannot go out with his needle. That was the Mishnah statement. Now we also had a discussion. Do we make a double zera, a fence on a fence, when it comes to Shabbat, to protect Shabbat? That was a argument between Abaye, and Rafa. That Abaye said we're going to make a double fence to protect that people shouldn't come to carry on Shabbat. Specifically for this law of carrying. Looking for coffee, David?
No, I thought there's a class 8:35 a.m. But Farch's class goes to 8:45. So I don't understand.
Maybe you can mention it to Haron. Maybe he'll take care of it. Right. So we had a discussion between an argument. This week's parsha is parsha from Mishpatim, and the parsha talks about two people quarreling, and then one guy gets up and he punches the other guy, and they have to pay for it. You have to pay for embarrassing, for pain, if the guy got out of work as a result of that. You have a lot of damage that you have to pay. The problem there was they were quarreling. Quarreling leads to a fight. You could argue halachically, you can have a disagreement. Hey, they're not quarreling. This is a kosher disagreement. So we have Abaye and Rava see things differently when it comes to whether the rabbis would make a double fence. And yesterday we saw that the Gemara Abaye showed his source why he came for it, and then Rava rejected his source. And Rava said that your source that you're learning it from is not a good enough source. But I understand that case is different, and therefore you can't prove your case from there. So that was the Gemara yesterday. Now the Gemara is coming back to prove from our Mishnah. It's going to attempt to prove one of the opinions of the Gemara, to prove it's going to be a support of Abaye. The Gemara is going to suggest the support of Abaye's opinion will make a double fence when it comes to the prohibition of carrying on Shabbat. By the way, I believe when you learn about halacha, when you learn the Gemara, we're going to have a much more sensitivity to these laws. It comes much more on our mind. Because Tanan, we're on 11b2, the bottom, the beginning of the page, like the third paragraph. It says Tanan. We learned in our Mishnah. Tanan, the tailor cannot go out before Shabbat with his needle, within a half hour before Shabbat. Shema yishkach v'yitzeh. Maybe he's going to go out and he's going to forget and he's going to come carry it. My love, probably, what are we talking about? When it says he can't go out, my love, where is this needle? Is the needle in his hand, or is the needle stuck into his garment? The Gemara's understanding that the normal way to carry a needle is in your hand. It's not the normal way the Gemara is understanding at this point to carry a needle by sticking it into your garment. That's not how you carry needles. So, yet, with that being said, the Mishnah is afraid that you are going to forget and you're going to go out with it stuck in your garment. Now, even if you go out stuck in your garment, that would be a rabbinic prohibition, because carrying in the unusual manner is rabbinically prohibited. Carrying in the usual manner is biblically. Like I gave an example yesterday. If a person goes ahead, I would say, if you put a key in your sock, I would think that's not the normal way of carrying. What do you think, Aaron? The normal way of carrying? Not normal. So that should be a rabbinic. Morning, Akiva. Morning, Ralph.
Morning, Rabbi.
That should be a rabbinic prohibition. So the Gemara is saying, what are you telling? You're saying, don't go out before Shabbat with this needle in your garment. Now that's a rabbinic prohibition. There's no Torah prohibition to go out before Shabbat with a needle. Before Shabbat, Torah doesn't forbid you to do before Shabbat to go out with a needle. And what are you trying to protect from? Because maybe you're going to go out with it on Shabbat itself. But if I go out with it on Shabbat itself, that itself is not a biblical prohibition. Because if the Gemara's understanding, because if the needle is in my garment, stuck into my shirt, that's not a biblical prohibition to carry in that fashion. It's rabbinically. Aaron, am I clear or not? So therefore, and yet, nevertheless, the Mishnah stated I can't do it. So we see we will make a double offense when it comes to the law of carrying on Shabbat. David, you got the cheshbon? The Gemara says no proof. What does the Gemara say? No, maybe the Gemara says this is the discussion in the yeshiva. The yeshiva is having a discussion, and the Gemara says, "Well, that is talking about the naked libiyadeh." The Mishnah is talking about when the tailor is holding on to the needle in his hand, and it's before Shabbat, and he's walking out with the needle in his hand. You know, like usually tailors, you carry your supplies, and he carries his needle. So we're afraid if he carries the needle within a half hour before Shabbat, he might come to actually carry the needle on Shabbat in his hand. But we're talking about that the needle is in his hand. That is so therefore, it's not to protect a rabbinic law. It's a rabbinic to protect the Torah law. Because if you would go out on Shabbat with the needle in his hand, you'd be violating Shabbat. That's a normal way of carrying. So we say a few minutes, within a half hour before Shabbat, within a half hour before sunset, don't go out with the needle in your hand, because maybe you're going to come to carry it on Shabbat. By the way, it's something that needs looking into. That, you know, the Mishnah talks about the needle, but what about other items, right? The Mishnah says you can't go out with a needle before Shabbat. What about other items? Now, anything that would be similar to a needle that would be forgotten, that was concerned that you'll be forgetting, you should also not do before Shabbat. Should carry certain things, and we'll see. You have to be extra careful when it's before Shabbat, when it's close to Shabbat, what's in your pockets close to Shabbat. You have to just be aware, and we have to, you know, is it just specifically a needle, a type of item that a person carries, that it just carries all the time, because you always carry it. It's not common that you're going to forget, you know, you might do it. What about other items? If you put money in your pocket right before Shabbat, we have to be aware and be careful about things that go into your pocket, because there's another halacha we're going to see that you have to check your pockets before Shabbat to make sure you have nothing in your pockets. So then also the question: should you put things in your pocket on Shabbat? I mean, if you're in a place there's no eruv, I personally don't put anything in my pockets on Shabbat. On Shabbat, I don't put a tissue in my pocket, even though I'm inside, I'm indoors. I don't put it in my pocket. I'm afraid maybe I put it in my pocket, I might come and walk out with the tissue. Therefore, at the Shabbatons, why do we say check your pockets? But not everybody does that. Many people put tissues in their pockets on Shabbat, and they rely on the fact they're going to check their pockets before they leave. But I'm concerned that I might forget. I don't want to take a chance. I mean, there are opinions that say you should not. If you have to worry about things before Shabbat, certainly on Shabbat itself, some people say you shouldn't put anything in your pockets on Shabbat. There are opinions, but we know many people are lenient and they do put things in their pockets on Shabbat, relying on the fact they're going to check their pockets before they go out. Okay, so the Gemara says low. Okay, so that's what the Gemara rejects. It's no proof, because it's not a fence on a fence. It's a fence to protect the Torah law of not to carry. So the Gemara shoots back. Toshma. I have it says clearly in the Breita. Here's a Breita. Lo yetze chayat b'machdo hatchuvelo b'bigdo. So here it says that on the bottom column of the page of 11b2, the tailor cannot go out with the needle that's stuck in his garment. So that's clearly, it's not in his hand. It's stuck in his garment. Now, the Braita doesn't identify what time of the day he can't go out. It doesn't say, are we talking about before Shabbat or during Shabbat? But the Gemara's understanding, my love, Erev Shabbat, most probably it's talking about Erev Shabbat. Most probably it's talking about Friday afternoon. And you're telling me on Friday afternoon, because listen, a needle anyway, a needle is mukseh. So anyways, why would the Gemara, you would think he shouldn't be having a needle on him that he's going to be going out on Shabbat with anyways. And and most probably it's obvious you can't carry a needle on Shabbat in your garment. Maybe that's what the Gemara is thinking at this point. And therefore, if it says you can't go out with a needle that's stuck in your garment, it was probably talking about before Shabbat. Then a half hour before Shabbat, because we're afraid you're going to go out on Shabbat with that needle that's stuck in your garment. But if you go out with a needle stuck in your garment on Shabbat, it's only under rabbinic law because it's not the normal way of carrying. So yet we're saying they were going to make a fence to protect the rabbinic law. So the Gemara says, "Lo, that's talking about Kitanyahi b'Shabbat. We're talking about Shabbat itself. Let's say, you know, let's say you have what would be the example. So I would think the case might be that you went ahead and you left a needle in your garment. Let's say and then you needed that garment for Shabbat. Now, even though there is a law, you're supposed to wear different clothing, you're supposed to honor the Shabbat with different clothing. You should have nicer clothing, right, David? It says that you're not supposed to have the same clothing that you wear on the weekdays for Shabbat. But let's say the guy was stuck and he has a shirt and he has a needle stuck in the shirt. And so that's what, and the Bright is telling us you can't go, and let's say he has no interest in that needle. He has no use for that needle. He's not interested in carrying that needle. He just wants to wear that shirt. So the Bright is telling us you can't go out with that because it's still a form of carrying. At least on a rabbinic level, you're violating the Shabbat by carrying in an unnormal way this.
Carrying?
Right? It's unnormal. If it's unnormal, if you put something in your pocket, in your sock, right? That's unnormal. It's a rabbinic prohibition. The Torah prohibition is to do an act in the normal fashion. If you go ahead and you do something in an unnormal fashion, that will be a rabbinic. Right. If you could take a pen and put it in your mouth and write with it, it's not a Torah prohibition. That's not a normal way of writing, right? So but it's still prohibited. So therefore, that's what the Gemara says. That's talking about Shabbat itself. Kitanhi b'Shabbat itself. So the Gemara says, Vatanya, but and what will be the problem? And the problem with going out with the needle, and maybe let's say perhaps if I have no interest in that needle, and let's say I can't go out on Shabbat with that needle that's stuck in my garment, because maybe I see they learned the shot is because maybe I'm going to come to carry it in my hand itself. And therefore that's why I can't go ahead and go out on Shabbat with that needle stuck in my garment. So the Gemara says, Tanya, but we learned in a Braita. You see, the question is, why can't I go out on Shabbat with the needle stuck in my garment? Is it because I'm carrying the needle in an unusual fashion? Or is it because I might come to carry the needle actually with my hand? So they're learning the pshat is that I might come to carry the needle in my hand. But Tanya, the Gemara says, but we learned in a Braita. The Braita says that even if they're talking about before Shabbat, and it's in your garment. So now I think we nailed it. Now we got the cases clear. It's before Shabbat. It's a rabbinic prohibition. Don't do it. And where is the needle? It's not on my hand. It's in my garment. And we see I still can't go in and go out. Why? It's a fence. Don't go out with it in my garment because maybe I might go ahead and go out on Shabbat with it. But if I go out with it on a Shabbat while it's in my garment, it's only rabbinic. So I'm creating a rabbinic prohibition before Shabbat. Don't do it. because I might go out on Shabbat with it in my garment. But if I go out with it in my garment, it's also only rabbinic because it's not as a normal fashion. And yet we say you can't do it. So this supports Abaye's opinion that will make a double fence to protect the law of carrying, which is a very um, one of the hardest of all the 39 malachot on Shabbat. People understand you can't make a fire. People understand you can't build on Shabbat. People understand you can't do these type of things on Shabbat. Can't boil the water for my coffee. But people might not understand that you can't. We need to strengthen the law of carrying. People don't see a problem. What's the big deal if I put something? I carry my keys. People like we saw yesterday. One of the members of the group. Right, because that right. So, but you did by doing that, you did it. That's not the normal way to carry a handkerchief, right? So you avoided the biblical prohibition, but you should. Someone told you. Someone had pointed out to you, which rabbi did, and they said to you, "That's not it." Right? Yeah. Okay. See, okay. He has a sense of humor. The man has a sense of humor. Then he moved to a place where there was an Eruv and they would never even have to worry about it. That was the story. Good morning, Emmanuel. Listen, the fact, but right, you didn't know the fact. You see, you thought this was you did. So he did it in a way because he thought that he was allowed to do it in that fashion. That's why he did it in that fashion. There are people that think that they could carry a key by putting a string and putting the key, and they don't want to carry the key in their pocket. But I still see that, I think. And they put like a what do they put the key has like a hole in it, and you put the string and they're carrying the key that way. But that's carrying a key. Maybe it's carrying the key in not a normal fashion. Not the normal, it's still rabbinically prohibited. It would seem to me it's not the normal way carrying a key, right? What do you say? I think it's the normal way carrying a key. I know people carry keys that way. That's not the normal way of carrying a key. If they would have done something in a way to make it a beautiful necklace, a beautiful something, making an ornament, made it gold plated and certain things, if it would have become normal to wear such a thing, then it would be a different story. You know what a lot of ladies doing for Shabbat on the Lower East Side, they make a pin, they have a pin and they put a key and they gold plate it. And they make it look nice, so it's more of an ornament, and that's how they wear it. So the Gemara says,
He took the coffins
who is the
and
author of this?
paraded them all
Right,
out.
Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara says that, you know what, until now we've been going with the understanding that having a needle in your garment is not a normal way of carrying a garment, of carrying a needle. However, Rabbi Yehuda says there is an opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, and he says the Amma Uman Kiterech Umnato. If this is the way you, as a professional, I wonder, like the name tag, right? Aaron's wearing a name tag, right? So that's the and you have it tied to you, right? So that's like in a certain sense a professional who wears his this is the norm sometimes, not here, this is the norm every day that a person goes out with it with that name tag. So that's the normal way of carrying a name tag, right? The normal way of carrying this name tag it's not an ornament, it's not a piece of jewelry, it's not clothing. So what is it? It's something that people are showing. They want you to. It's showing that you're part of this company and this is your ID. So instead of having your ID in your pocket, that's one way of carrying your ID. You have your ID by the way you have the ID. So that's carrying. Therefore, on Shabbat, you would not be able to go out with that on Shabbat if you're carrying your ID. That's called carrying your ID. So too, if they used to, the professionals would sometimes go out with this in their garment, and the reason why they did it was to advertise. The way it would seem from Rashi that they would advertise. How do you know in those days? How do you know who's a tailor? How do you know who's who's a weaver? How do you know all different types of professions? Someone who dyes clothing. So they would advertise by wearing they have a little piece of material or something to show that if you see that material, you'll see that they dye clothing. And therefore, since sometimes during the week, this was the norm, sometimes during the week, to go out with this in this fashion, to wear they're wearing their, this is how they're carrying their um, needle. It's no longer, according to Yehuda, that's not called unusual. That's not called not the norm. That's the norm. Meaning wearing your ID is the norm. And for them, sometimes during the week, at times, not every day did they go out with that advertisement, because maybe certain days they had work to do and they didn't need to advertise, perhaps. But because they would go out, sometimes this is a common thing that they would go out. It's called enough normal to where it became more the norm for them, for those professionals, to wear the needle in their garment. And because of that, what? It's actually a Torah violation, as David said. If this craftsman, if this tailor would walk out, not for everybody else, because everyone else would say it's not considered the norm, but for the tailors, this is the norm. And being that's the norm, so if he would go out with it on Shabbat, it will actually be a Torah violation. So now we create a fence, right, Asaf? We create a fence for that by saying before Shabbat, don't go out before Shabbat with this stuck in your garment, because you might go out on Shabbat with it in the same fashion. And if you go out on Shabbat, there's a Torah violation. So the rabbis, Adam, is it clear, create this rabbinic fence to protect the Torah law. That's what the Gemara says. The Gemara says, Yehuda, that says the Uman derech umenato, a craftsman, if it's the way of his craft, chayav, he's violating on a Torah level, even though other people do not carry in that fashion. Therefore, according to Rabbi Yehuda, you would be chayav men Torah on a Torah level. The Tanya, we have a braita, that the braita illustrates this law. It says lo yitzeh hachayat v'machdo hatzuvlo bigdo. We say that the tailor cannot go out with the needle in his garment on Shabbat. V'lo nagar b'kesem sheba'ozno. A carpenter, let's say he has his ruler. He has his ruler behind his ear. You see the math people that have their pencil. In the old days, the math people had a pencil, right? People who worked, they would have a pencil behind the ear, but there they would have the pencil for practical purposes. If I want to have where do I keep my pencil? I know someone who keeps his pencil in his front pocket. He moves his shirt. He really should tell him to keep his pencil during the weekdays. Put it in your ear. Put it on your ear. Will protect your clothing. But they were doing this to advertise, I'm a carpenter. Today what do people have? The tape measure. That's a sign of a carpenter. You want to see a carpenter? Get it. You see a tape measure, you know he's a carpenter, right? What do you say, David? Now, in those days, they had a ruler behind the ear. V'lo sorek, and now if you were a sorek, you used to work by combing clothing different with the comb, they would put a mishicha sheba'ozno. They would put some sort of, if you look at number 18, it's a craftsman combs cloth. So he says he uses a certain type of cord in his craft. So you go ahead and you put this cord behind. He can't go out with this cord behind his ear. V'lo gardi, and if someone's a weaver, be'ira sheba'ozno. Also, he can't go out with it's also a utensil that he can't go out. The weaver can't go out with his utensil, with some sort of showing that he's a weaver. V'lo sabah. Let's say you're a dyer, you dye clothing. So how people want a nice, you want a nice color. So you can't go out with a little piece of cloth, like a sample, to show his that was, samples of various colors. You can't go out with that. Also, around his neck, see, or on his shoulder. You can't go out with it because that's carrying. Below shulchani, the dina shebaz no. Now, a person who is your money man, you're a banker, switch money. That's how you do for a living. You can't go out with a coin on your. Now, obviously, we know a coin is mukseh, but here the question is, would mukseh is a rabbinic law, right? I can't handle money on Shabbat. I can't go ahead on Shabbat in my house, take out a dollar bill from my drawer. But what about a coin? But if I put it behind my ear to show I put the coin behind my ear because I am a banker, and I walk out with it on Shabbat from private to public, did I do a Torah violation? So that's going to be the argument here. All these things, all these craftsmen, if they go out with the item that they use sometimes during the week to advertise their craft, and meaning there's mukseh involved in some of these things, not in the cloth. It's only moving mukseh. Technically, if you touch mukseh, you don't move it. To my knowledge, I'll let you look more, but I don't. The prohibition of mukseh is only to move mukseh. Technically, if a person has a television, right, and he touches the television on Shabbat, doesn't move it, too big to move by touching it, I don't think he's in violation of mukseh. Mukseh is you can't move the television on Shabbat. You can't move a pen. Many items, if you touch it, it will move. But if you're dealing with the television, if you touch the television, it's not moving. Most likely a coin, if you touch a coin, unless you touch it in a way that's not going to move. You know what I'm saying? But many times, therefore, because it's very common that the coin will move, I would think you shouldn't touch the coin. But so here we're not dealing with the issue of the mukseh. We're dealing with it at a higher level prohibition of actually carrying the violation of Shabbat that carries with it a very serious punishment. So therefore, here we have the cases, some of the cases of the craftsman. Now we're on page 11b3, Mabruk. Now we turn the page. V'im yatsa, and if he went out, by the way, these people were pretty good. They kept it. They had the coin behind the ear, and they're pretty talented people, right? When was the last time we carried a coin behind your ear? You know what? If that's what you do if that's your way of advertising, that's their advertising. Isn't it fascinating, Adam, how they advertised what their profession was? Morning, Ronnie. So the Gemara says, "Im yatsa," but if he went out, meaning we told him don't do it, but he went ahead and he went out with this coin behind his ear on Shabbat. So we say now, for the average person, they will not go out. It's not a normal way of carrying a coin. It's like putting it behind your ear. But if he went out and he did it, so we're going to say that even though for you, as a banker, it's common for you to put the coin behind. During the weekdays, you would many times put it behind the ear, but it's not considered the norm for the average person. So he holds him yatsa patur. You're exempt, aval asur. Even though you're exempt, you're not in the violation of Torah law, but you're in violation of rabbinic law of carrying not just the mukseh issue, but even the carrying. We have the cop could write you 2 tickets on this. You go out on Shabbat with a coin in back of your ear. If you're a banker, so one mukseh problem, we got a ticket, $115 for that. Now we got a $225 ticket because you carried rabbinically, you violated the Shabbat by carrying in a prohibited rabbinic fashion. Of al asur divrei Rav Meir. That's the opinion of Rav Meir. The Gemara at this point is thinking that the reason Rav Meir is because since for the average person it's not the normal way of carrying, so therefore it's not prohibited even for the person who goes out sometimes during the week with, this guy who's the craftsman, or this guy who's a baker who sometimes goes out during the week that way. It's also not prohibited for him on a Torah level, right? Let's say you have 1,000,000 people, and 990,000 people don't go out that way, and there's 10,000 people that go out that way, and the only way they go out that way is using it as a form of advertisement, and they do that sometimes. The Gemara at this point is thinking, no problem, very good. The Gemara is thinking at this point that that is the reason why there's no Torah violation. Ruchim habayim to Rabbi Mansour. So that's what the Gemara is thinking now. We'll see. It seems like that's going to change later. So Amar now, Tani Chada. However, the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda, here's Rabbi Yehuda. Yehuda says, Uman, if you're a craftsman, and this is the norm for you to go ahead, and during the weekdays, you sometimes go out with this in this fashion to advertise your craft, that's called the norm for you. And for you, if you go out on Shabbat in that fashion, it's a sort min Torah. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's a Torah violation, and that is what the Gemara wants to say, that the Braita that went on record that says you can't go out, tailor can't go out with the needle stuck in his garment before Shabbat, unless he goes out with the needle stuck in his garment on Shabbat, is to protect the Torah law. For that Braita holds, like Rabbi Yehuda, that you can't carry on Shabbat, you can't, Torah violation to wear the needle in your garment on Shabbat. And then look what the Gemara, Uman, if you're an Uman, if you're a professional, you're doing in the way of your craft, that is chayav, you are violating the Torah, ushar kol adam, but everybody else is patur. Everyone else who does it, who's not a craftsman, is violating the rabbinic law. But you, the craftsman, is violating Torah law. Okay. Now the Gemara, the Gemara now brings two braitos that seem contradicted to each other. Tani Chada. We learned in a braita. Lo yitzi hazav. A zav, as we said yesterday, or the day before, a zav, the word zav means a flow. That's what a zav means, a flow. It's a man who has an unusual flow, an unusual discharge. Not normal discharge that he has. It's not the normal discharge that a person would have when he's with his wife. It's something unusual. And some say it's a sign of he's sick, some sickness that he has. And the Torah says that will contaminate the person if he has this unusual discharge. And if he has more than one of these discharges, let's say he has one in the morning and one at night, that will make him contaminated for 7 days. But if he has 3 of those discharges, then he'll be contaminated. Then he has to also bring a korban. He has to go. There's a process. Now let's explain the process. After he has 2 different discharges at 2 different times, it could be in the same day. If he has it, he will be contaminated for 7 days. He has to count 7. He needs to count 7, and the Torah talks about that he has to also count. He needs to count 7 clean days in order for him to become pure. Now he becomes contaminated after 2 times, but to bring a korban, to bring an offering, if he had 3 times, if he had 3 discharges, which 3 is chazakah, like 3 is a big number, was done 3 times. So then he has to go ahead, and not only he has to count 7 clean days, he also has to go ahead and bring a korban, bring an offering. That's the zav. Now, what did they do? So a person, what they would do is, and they would wear, sometimes they would put like some sort of something like a cup or something, a tube or something to catch. And if he would have a discharge, he would have this thing there to catch this discharge. And the question is, if you go out with it on Shabbat, with this tube that he placed there, like a little cup there by his area where his private area to catch the discharge. So he's not allowed to go out on Shabbat with that tube over there, because he's carrying he's carrying he's carrying. It's not a garment, not a garment that you're wearing for clothing purposes. It's not. So you're not allowed to go out with it on Shabbat. That's called you're carrying that tube. Now you can't go out. Now for im yatsa. What about if you went out with it on Shabbat? So we have two different opinions in the Braita. One Braita says potur aval asur. One Braita says it's potur. He is potur, but it's forbidden. He's not. He didn't violate the Torah law, but he violated rabbinic law. But Tanya Idoch, and a different Braita says, lo yitzei, he's not allowed to go out. V'im yotza chayav chata. And if he went out, he is obligated. He went out unintentionally. He didn't know. I didn't know, Rabbi. I did not know that I can't go out with this tube, with this thing that's attached to his private area. And he didn't know, so he has to go ahead and bring a korban chatat, a sin offering. Now, a sin offering, if a person violates Shabbat unintentionally, that's when they have to bring a sin offering. A sin offering is only by a Torah violation. There's no sin offering by a rabbinic violation, right? If a guy forgets that today is Shabbat, so then if you forgot that today was Shabbat, you have to go ahead and bring, and he did work. He made a fire, he cooked something. He has to, at the time of the Beit HaMikdash, he would have to go ahead and bring a korban, a sin offering, for forgetting that it was Shabbat. Or I knew it was Shabbat, but I did not know. I didn't know I can't cook up water on Shabbat. I didn't know there's a problem to cook up the coffee, to make a coffee on Shabbat, to cook up the water. I didn't know I can't cook water. So if a person didn't know, those are two instances that a person will have to bring a korban chatat, a sin offering. So if this guy did not know that he could not go outside from private to public with this tube, whatever that was attached to himself, he would be in violation of the Torah unintentionally. It's being a korban chatat. So what do we see? One Braita says there's a Torah violation. This is called carrying. This is called, meaning, the question is this normal for a person to wear this or not? The average person does not wear this thing. It's only the Zav, the guy who has this discharge issue, he is putting on this thing to catch the discharge. So we see two different opinions. One says it's a Torah violation, one says it's not a Torah violation. So the Gemara wants to suggest, the Gemara first suggests, Amar Rav Yosef, how do you answer these two opinions? Sounds like contradictory. So the Gemara says they're two different rabbis. The Gemara suggests at the first, maybe they're two different rabbis. One rabbi, lo kasha, Harem Meir, Harab Yehuda. The Gemara suggests that, you know what? We just said that there's an argument. One Emmanuel. We just said there's an argument if a craftsman goes out with his advertisement on Shabbat, is that called normal or not? So the Gemara at this point wants to suggest maybe that's the same story here. It's true for the average person, it's not normal to wear this thing, and therefore the average person, it's not the normal way of carrying. But for the Zav, that's the normal way. The guy who has a discharge, it's normal for him to wear this thing. So therefore that's called normal, that's called carrying. Maybe that the opinion that says there will be a Torah violation is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that says that that's the norm for that craft, so therefore that's called carrying. However, the other opinion that says it's not a Torah violation holds, since it's not the norm for the average person to wear that, it's not called carrying. We'll see tomorrow the Gemara is going to reject this idea. I want to wish everyone a beautiful day. All the best to everybody. Yes, take care, Ralph. Take care, Asaf.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. No, if they're normal, then it's called carrying. I mean, it's not wearing, it's not clothing. It's normal for the person to carry it in that fashion. I mean, this is called carrying. If I wear my ID out in public, I'm carrying my ID. Because even though I'm wearing it, even though it's attached to me, but that's a normal way of, that's called, if that's the normal way of carrying, that's the commercial, but if it's not the normal way of carrying it, then it would not be a biblical violation, it would be a rabbinic violation. If, in order to be violating the Torah for carrying, you have to carry in a normal fashion. I mean, we're saying wearing this ID is called carrying. If you go ahead and you have a coin behind your ear, you're carrying a coin. If you but if it's not normal, then it's not a Torah violation. The Torah violation is when you do an act, a working act, in the normal fashion. Have a great day, everybody.
Yeah.
You too, David. Have a great day. Tomorrow, I'm going to the college. I'm at college now.